Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. Apologies if I'm laughing already. He is known from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, Daniel Jones might not be that good.
Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus of NFL Twitter. I saw a lot of thank you Ed Donatels from both Giants and Vikings Twitter, which I think suggests that maybe the Vikings have screwed the Giants I shouldn't say long-term, medium-term. It's essentially a 2-year contract for his performance in the playoffs.
Drawplay Dave is losing his mind right now over how the Giants are this year as a result of the $40 million they're giving to Daniel Jones, and watching Brian Dable throw the tablet next to Daniel Jones as he's on the sidelines. Man, that's rough.
But also, if you're Brian Dable, what do you all you have is frustration. That's the only feeling that you have.
Yeah,
right?
there is nothing
I gotta teach him to get out of this. There's none of that, right?
No.
It's just
that is a man who is appropriately screwed. That is
$40 million a year. 40, and that's, by the way, that's the contract Kirk offered the Vikings. Is okay, $40 million a year, and the Vikings were like, "You're not good enough for that. What are you talking about?" And Daniel Jones.
I'm sorry, Daniel Jones has a playoff win against you, which was clearly your fault.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yes. Obviously, that one is on you. I mean, he did throw the fourth down to TJ, I guess. But,
that whole So
yeah,
it was interesting to watch that. It's been a very interesting night. Let's get into the show and see where this one goes. Welcome you guys to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well, enjoying yourselves this fine, uneventful Monday evening. A couple things that we want to share. If you'd like to support us financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com. I'm not editing tonight. Patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month, or for a little less per year. You can get access to stuff like the bonus shows, which you have an amazing bonus episode coming up here. Let me tell you what. After that, we've got paypal.me/NorseCode as well. Special thank you to Brian Lopez for sending something over to us this episode. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it, Brian. Thank you. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode again, because I'm just going to say that again, and you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up a t-shirt, baby onesie. I
don't know.
There's plenty of options over there at norsecode.threadless.com. Arif, you feel like doing a review of what happened during the Panthers game?
No, how about this? How about a story time, James? I've got a story to tell.
Oh, we're doing story time with Arif. This is always a classic. Kids, come inside, sit around the radio, or however it is you're listening to this. Do you have a funny story for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Vikings are 1-0 this week. That's great. They won their game against the Panthers. That's cool. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting insights. You can read about those at wideleft.substack.com. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a phone call I had while we were recording the bonus questions for the Patreon. For those who don't know, so we do bonus questions, right? And those bonus questions appear for people who, donate to the show, and you can hear them on Patreon. And we do them before the rest of the show so that I've got, maybe the most energy or whatever, right? We just get them out of the way.
Yeah. Doing those afterwards would not be a good idea. We're both tired. Right. We don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So fantastic idea. So it's happening. James and I are discussing the fact that he got an email from LiveJournal, I guess. I don't know. Celebrating his 19th year anniversary. We end up going on a deep dive of both of our respective LiveJournals. Not great. And James is in the middle of telling some story. I couldn't tell you. This is not a knock on the story or James's storytelling ability, but rather a lesson in emotional anchoring and what happens when big events happen in your life.
More of a story of what happens next.
So I get a call. So James is like telling this story, and I'm like, I get this call. It's from like restricted, right? There's no number, but it is 11:18 p.m., right? Like it's who's calling me, right? Because it's, telemarketers don't usually call you then. And no one I know calls, just like generally, just like uses the phone. and so I'm just like, what is happening? And obviously I don't have, the name, because sometimes people are like, hey, Arif, I really need to talk to someone. It's okay, fine, I'll pick up the phone. But usually I will have like their name, right? They're not like hiding their number from me. And honestly, most people I know have Signal, so they'd be calling me through Signal anyway. No, that's not what's happening. It's a phone call. So I pick it up. I'm like, hey, hello? What? I'm just like confused. And what's crazy is that this is maybe one of the clearest phone calls I've ever heard in my life. And James tells me afterwards that actually it got picked up on the...
It absolutely all got picked up by the mic.
Yeah.
It was
but
nice
it was
and
like
loud.
Crystal clear. I was like almost shocked, right? It was like I was listening to a podcast, but it was a phone call. So they're like, is this, I don't even know how they pronounce my name, Mr. Hassan or something like
Hassan,
that?
Arif Hassan.
Yeah, is this Mr. Hassan? I'm like, this is, because I don't feel like I'm about to record. I don't feel like correcting, and it doesn't matter, right? And is Arif Hassan? And I'm just like, oh, double dip. Okay, cool. That's me. And I think there's like one more confirmation. It's like, yeah, that's me, right? And they're like, sorry, do you drive a Hyundai? And I was like, yeah, 2017 Hyundai Elantra. Why? Why? What's going on?
I am looking around in my office at this moment like Chris Pratt doing that moment, like from the GIF. That's all I'm doing. I have to go to the bathroom, but I have to see what happens next.
There's like in my brain, I'm just like, it has got to be more likely that the insurance company is calling me about a problem on the bill or something like that than anything new has occurred
at 11:20 at night.
Yeah,
on
right. Yeah,
Monday.
Obviously, right. Obviously, that's what's happening, right? And I'm just like, man, I really hope it's like Monopoly, right? It's like bank error in your favor, right? The insurance company owes me money. I'm just like, my brain is just like, no way could this be bad news. I've already had that. Yeah, you can't have bad news again.
I mean,
that doesn't happen. Which, I mean, I should have read the live journal a little bit more because, oh my God.
Life doesn't vague post, as it turns out.
Yeah, right, yeah. Wow, I had a bad time of it in high school, it turns out. But yeah, so like, I'm just like, okay, great. And they're like, all right, is this your license plate number or whatever? And they list it off. And probably, right? Like, I don't have it memorized. But I was like, yeah, I recognize a lot of those letters. So that's probably it. That's the correct one. I don't say that, obviously. But they're like, hey, we're with the Minneapolis police. And I was like, yeah, I gathered by the time you read off my license plate. But yeah, okay.
I'm going, they struck again.
Yeah, right. I was like, my brain was just like, did you take my car again? Well, I'm glad you called. Right? Instead of me walking outside with actually a neighbor knocking on the door saying, hey, your car doesn't have a window now. And then later at 9, me walking outside to just not see it except for shattered glass. Right. This time they called me to tell me they stole the car. That's really wonderful news.
It's a step up.
You could just drive it back with the transaction completed. And they were like, where did you last put your car? Something like that. Where's your car right now? Or where did you last put your car? Something along those lines, right? Like, where do you imagine your car to be right now is how I interpreted it, right? Which turns out is the correct question, basically. And so I give off the address that I'm staying, which, by the way, my car is still not registered to the address I'm staying at because I just moved. And it was annoying enough to renew my license. I think I told you about that, James.
You
right?
did.
Yeah. It's not like an interesting story by itself, but like as part of a larger series of maladies, it fits nicely in, right? It's like I show up to the DMV an hour and a half before it closes. They're like, hey, this might take an hour, wait. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I budgeted all the time in the world for this. And The DMV closes, but not before they call the number before mine. I am C214, they are C213. That person had his business taken care of. Me, not so much. I had to leave. So I did not get my license renewed that day. 2 days later, I get my license renewed by going to the Eagan DMV instead of the one in Southdale. And that one does not have physical space. The line is literally outside. Like, you're just waiting out in a strip mall, like actually just a strip mall. Like, anyone who's been to that Eagan license knows exactly what I'm talking about. There is no place to be. So when someone leaves, someone else opens the door to walk in. There's a 2-person line inside and a 20-person line outside. So that's what I did 2 days ago, yesterday,
in order to drive this car.
Right. Yeah. Because my license has expired. So, I need it to normal things. Right. Which, by the way, I don't have my passport. Like, and I have to fly. I have a passport, but someone else has it for reasons I don't really want to get into. I'm like, hey, you have my passport. And
this is turning into a Daniel Snyder thing now. Like,
yeah, right.
My passport got stolen. You can have it back eventually, but you're gonna sign an NDA until I tell you otherwise.
This was it was just a mistake. Like, they had to grab a bunch of stuff. My passport was in it. It's like a totally normal, like, oh, okay, you've got my passport. And they had already let me know months ago that they had my passport, right? So it wasn't like, it's like, oh, hey, you've got my passport, oh yeah, I can leave it at this place. You can just pick it up and I'll send you a picture and all that. Well, they did that 2 days ago, right? When like the day after I actually successfully renewed my license. I'm not going to get my driver's ID for 2-3 weeks, right? So I need that as a form of ID. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go and drive and get it. The thought in my head, right? The normal, hey, when I've got time, I'm not going to do it on a football Sunday. I'm so busy on Mondays because I've got like 3 things to record and an article to write, and I got to watch Monday Night Football, which I could have just skipped that. And so I'll literally, I budgeted the time. I have it on my calendar for tomorrow to pick up this passport, right? Just drive over to this place and pick it up, right? We'll see about that, I guess, because, hey, rest of the story that I was originally telling comes up. Hey, so can you go outside and confirm that your car is at that address, right? Are you at that address? I was like, yeah. Can you go outside and confirm that the car is there? And I was like, I highly suspect it is not, because this phone call would not be happening otherwise. And go outside. And I was like, yeah, there's no car here. They're like, yeah, we just saw it speeding away from us on a highway. I was like, oh my God.
Yep. His car was stolen again. This time, potentially, by someone other than the police, but we can't confirm that.
The universe of possibilities expands beyond the police at this moment. Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Unlikely that the police officially stole my car, though. Mm-hmm. If the police stole it, it would be in an unofficial capacity. Otherwise, they probably would not call to let me know. I was telling my friends, like, hey, I'm gonna like dip out of this group chat. My car just got stolen, and so they're like, oh my God, that's so bad. The normal friend like sympathy. Some of them are just like, how does this keep happening to you? Which, like, yeah, fair enough. And they're like, well, the good news is if you got a call from the police, they probably have your car. And I was like, no, they saw it speeding away. and I tell the police, I don't think so. I'm outdoors now, so I'm not near this microphone, so I don't think
I didn't
James
pick up part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, so this car was literally stolen like 2 months ago, and they're like, yeah, the only reason that we have your phone number is because you filed that police report. I'm like, great, good, that's better than it's not, right? Like, that's okay, fine. I can't like express too much joy about that fact, right? But it's just like, okay, well, at least that part worked, I guess. Cool. And so like I sit back down in front of this microphone that's still recording, and they're like, yeah, so if you find the car, don't touch it. And I was like, not a problem. I normally don't want to touch it. It's great.
I just wanted to be done with this damn thing.
Yeah, it's like and they're like, yeah, so here's the case number. If you find the car, call us. And I was like, can you give me a number to call? like just the non-emergency number, or
Yeah.
do you have that on hand? Can I write that down? And they're like, okay, yeah, just call dispatch. And I was like, all right, it's not a number, but thanks. And yeah, so the police were, I don't know if very helpful is the right set of words.
More
but
helpful than when they took your car the first
right.
time.
I mean, on a relative scale, this is certainly superior. They were
a
certainly
sentence
polite.
I can say.
Yeah. They were certainly polite, and they acknowledged that my day was not good. They ended the call with, I hope the rest of your night goes better, or something along those lines. And I was like, thanks, man. And I couldn't say I hope they total the car, right? That wouldn't have helped. But I'm just like, all right, that's cool. That's wonderful. Okay. So anyway, Harrison Smith had like 3 sacks, 14 tackles, forced fumble led to a scoop and score from DJ Wanham, of all people. He's been having a better year than he's had in a long time. Great game. Pass protection wasn't entirely there for Cousins, but it was better than I think we've come to expect. Cousins, not a great game from him. One of the interceptions was entirely his fault, one of the worst ones I've ever seen thrown. The other one wasn't. That brings up a question about Ed Ingram. When are they going to replace him with Dalton Reisner? I don't know. Man, that's crazy. Is the defense good now? Probably not, but that was nice to see. There's your game recap.
We're going to do the mailbag, which does have a number of game questions in it. This is what we're doing tonight. There's no way to go back on the rails after it went this far off.
Yeah, while we were recording the show.
It could not, we've had people talk about their favorite moment in show history being when we were doing the show and the Cleveland Brown ripped off the helmet, or it was the Steeler that ripped off the helmet, whichever it was, and just started our live reaction to that was their favorite moment.
It was Myles Garrett beating
Myles Garrett
over the head with his helmet.
Exactly. So we've had people say that was their favorite. This bonus episode, my God.
I feel like I handled the call pretty well. I was firm but polite.
Yeah.
I didn't blame the police. I didn't tell them that they stole the car the first time. Again, a detail that is true but would not have helped.
No, that might as well be the show title. A detail that was true but would not have helped. So we're going to get into the mailbag now. I promise there's football stuff, and this is mostly, and there's the other thing. This is mostly a football mailbag.
Yeah, this is maybe the most football-dense mailbag we've had since the beginning of the show.
We're going to go with this and see where we're at.
When we were discussing the show stuff, I was like, well, let's just skip all the football stuff and do the non-football stuff in the mailbag. And then I read through the mailbag and I was like, never mind.
Yeah, it turns out 90% football. So we're going to start here. Chris asks, what would the Vikings turnover rate have to be for the rest of the season just to finish league average?
I need to stress that the only reason I wanted to finish the show and do the actual show is because I did a bunch of research during Monday Night Football to answer these questions. So I have it all written out, so I can just go, by the way. So the Vikings are tied for first in the NFL with 10 total turnovers. This does not include anything that occurred during the Seahawks or Giants game, which I'm going to imagine impacts the outcome given what Daniel Jones did. But, ignoring that, right? So they've got 10 total turnovers, but in turnovers per drive, which is I think the preferred metric over turnovers per play, because if you have a bunch of plays that are relatively safe and short and don't advance the ball very much, you might have a lower turnover rate per play, but you have essentially increased the number of plays with which a turnover can happen. There's only one number of turnovers that can happen on a drive, right? It's 1 or 0, right? So, that is my preferred unit. So in terms of turnovers per drive, they're second, I believe, to the Raiders, I want to say. In order to finish with the league average turnovers per drive, so right now the Vikings are 23.8%. The league average right now in 2023 is 11.4%, which kind of matches the league average over the past couple of years. Assuming the same number of drives per game from the Vikings, which I think is a fair assumption from here on out, they would need to have exactly as many turnovers through the next 13 games as they've had through 4, which is 10. So they have to go from 2.5 turnovers a game to 0.75 or something like that. So That's the answer to that question.
Next question is going to be from Ingram's left arm, who asks, "Are we now a defensive team?"
No, that's a. Sorry, we saw Ingram's left arm in the last mailbag. I love that name. No, the Vikings are not a defensive team, but that was cool, right? That was so cool to see the defense do stuff.
Yeah.
I told you the defense was like better than the numbers suggested. I think I said that.
Yeah, but
if I didn't, pretend I did.
The fact that they're playing against the second worst team in the league helps.
Certainly, that plays a big role. But hey, if you look at how the Panthers have done offensively entering the game, and then you take a look at what they did in the game, the Vikings did better. So good defenses make bad offenses look worse than they've already looked. That's what happened.
Here's a sentence I never thought I would say. I enjoyed watching Harrison Smith in coverage this game. Old man Harrison Smith chasing old man Adam Thielen.
That was funny. That was great.
Very funny.
Yeah. And it helps that the Panthers don't have like receivers.
Yeah.
Like, so you don't have to worry about, but they also brought Harrison Smith like closer to the line of scrimmage instead of having him play like a bunch of deep center field stuff, which he's just not really suited for anymore, given his age. I mean, you can kind of tell. But like, he's still an effective blitzer. He did like actual, like, it wasn't just he's an unblocked pass rusher. He was like beating offensive tackles with pass rushing moves that like an edge rusher would have.
Yeah.
It was like really impressive stuff.
This was a hell of a game, and it was really fun to watch. Between him and Marcus Davenport, this was absolutely their day to shine.
Yeah, you see the vision, right? You see like, oh, that's why they signed Marcus Davenport.
Yeah, like, oh,
it makes sense.
You know what? I'll admit when I was wrong, and I was wrong for one day on the Marcus Davenport. That's where we're at. Also from Ingram's left arm, did Kirk take your advice and become scared of the power he now wielded? Is there any other explanation for how tentative he looked?
Yeah, that was kind of funny. Well, no. Like, because the advice was first to embrace it, right? To be as powerful as possible, if I remember correctly from the last mailbag, is to execute control over every facet of your life. He didn't do that, which is why he showed up in this game lacking confidence. It's all actually really consistent. That's what happens when you don't have confidence. You throw a couple of picks.
Not your father's dopamine, a hell of a username.
Wow.
Asks, has Brian Flores ever faced a Mahomes-led offense? If so, how did that go?
So twice I looked it up. So Mahomes or Flores went 1-1. Mahomes threw an average of 3 picks over those 2 games, so 6 picks total, which is encouraging. But he also threw like a bunch of touchdowns and for a bunch of yards. So 3 picks, 3 touchdowns on average, but a really high yards per attempt on average. In terms of net yards per attempt, which includes sacks, 9.67. That's very high. In terms of adjusted yards per attempt, which includes touchdowns and interceptions, that's 9. Sorry, I was just like housing an energy drink because it calms me down, and I got to look into that because that's wrong too. That's bad.
That can't be good for you. All I do is snort 96-hour energy. Like that's.
I found that again, by the way. I was like, hey, what are you? We're keeping all of that in the show. So yes. 9.67 net yards per attempt, which includes sacks. 9.14 adjusted yards per attempt, which includes a small bonus for touchdown and a big penalty for interceptions. And then when you combine those two, 8.23 adjusted net yards per attempt. So that's really good. That's like, it turns out Mahomes is a very good quarterback. The average number of points scored by the Chiefs in those 2 games, 36. So 1-1, that's great. The win that Brian Flores had, they scored 40 points. So that's gotta put that on the table. And also they were 2 very good defenses. I believe it was 2018. So Mahomes is obviously insane in 2018. I think it was his best year out of a stunning career. But it's 2018 with the New England Patriots. Which is the first year actually that he had coordinated or called defensive plays. And that team was excellent. Defensively, the Patriots team was really excellent. And then 2020 with the Miami Dolphins, where they were like 6th in EPA and 2nd in points allowed. So these were like really stunning defenses, and he still averaged like 36 points. But his individual performance was not necessarily quite as good as he always is, but it was still like elite. So that's look forward to that, I guess.
Yeah. Also from Not Your Father's Dopamine. Let's say you're some kind of sicko and you're trying to purchase 4 tickets to the Bears Vikings game in Chicago. Could not be me. No way.
Wouldn't dream of accusing you of it.
Nope, nah, absolutely not. When is the best time to purchase tickets? The interwebs suggest hours before the game. Is that true?
If you're purchasing an individual ticket or a pair of tickets, it is generally true that the cheapest possible tickets you could purchase are on the day of the game, hours before the game. But that's not like your only consideration when you're buying tickets, especially because you're theoretically, hypothetically, I'm not saying you would do this, but because the question asks about a group of 4 people that presumably want to sit together, then I would not recommend that.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, those like really cheap tickets, they're available for a reason. They're often the worst seats in the house. I've never regretted a game day ticket purchase. It's also like been years, but I've had a bunch of game day ticket purchases. I've never regretted it, but not all of them I've loved either, right? Some of them I was behind a pole at the Metrodome, right? It's, that's not wonderful. So, that's something to consider. If you want like actual seat choice, I would purchase them about a week before the game. Like it doesn't have to be right now. In fact, right now would be very expensive. I think the most expensive is 3 months out, or when the schedule is announced. Those are like the 2 most expensive times. 2 months out is still quite expensive, but a week before the game, yeah, you'll have not a ton of seat choice, but a fair amount of seat choice. The ticket prices will have gone down. The Bears will have blown up by then anyway, so good news there in terms of ticket prices. Also for the Vikings, I guess. And you'll more likely be able to purchase 4 seats together. I would begin looking 3 weeks beforehand, just in case there's very few 4-person options available for you. And then if there's a lot, wait a little bit, check the next couple of days, wait a little bit, and so on. But if the options narrow pretty quickly in terms of like 4-person seat choice, I'd jump on those rather than hope for something popping up on game day.
Yeah, or if you have some sort of consideration like it only really works for you to do an aisle seat, it's going to turn into a situation where you're better off, going a couple of weeks out instead of trying for that game day experience. But yeah,
if you've got a specific thing that you want those seats to do for you, you've got to do it a couple of weeks out.
Yeah. Zach asks, how much is competition at a position actually a thing that helps guys get better? Thinking about Reisner and Akers coming in, I feel like if you're a fringe starter in the NFL, you're likely already trying as hard as you can. Is there any data to suggest this makes them better?
In terms of data, that's not a thing that's very easy to measure, especially because it can be easily collinear with like just the concept of development, right? Like, had the Vikings brought like competition in for like, let's say Christian Ponder, first of all, in a way, Joe Webb was competition for Christian Ponder, but also like any improvement that we would have had, we would have just actually attributed to like his development. Like the fact that Sage Rosenfels wasn't supposed to be like a starter, it isn't like a really big part of how we attribute that kind of success. So it's pretty difficult. And then you have to kind of figure out kind of who is genuinely in a competition. And maybe you could, but it would take a lot of effort because you'd have to go through a bunch of training camp posts for a bunch of different teams to see who's rotating in an actual way, right? With the first team, which is very hard to do with receivers, by the way. So that you might not even be able to do that. But yeah, I don't know that there would be data. I would argue, I think that you're mostly right. I would argue that the reason it's good doesn't have to do with anybody pushing anybody, but because you have a higher guarantee that the player that emerges, that wins the competition, is pretty good. I made this point way back when the Vikings had both Andre Smith and Phil Lodeholt competing for the right tackle spot, which, it turns out the answer was neither of them. It's TJ Clemmings. Whoops. And he didn't win a competition. The other two just got hurt. Phil Lodeholt got hurt enough that he retired.
Nobody won when TJ Clemmings was playing.
Right, exactly. Nope. It was just like Phil Lodeholt was like finally healthy again. I think it was like 2015. Finally healthy again. And he'd lost a year due to injury, comes back, and the Vikings had just signed Andre Smith, and I was like, hey, the highs of both Lodeholt and Smith were pretty high. Like at their best, they were some of the best right tackles in the league. their peak wasn't very long lived, right? But at their best, they were some of the best right tackles in the league. Their worst is not great, but we're probably not going to get that. So the median outcome for either of them is that they are an above average right tackle, which is maybe optimistic for Andre Smith at the time, given how many bad seasons he had already, but it was on the table, right? And so I kind of modeled it. I was like, look, if the Vikings correctly, we'll assume for the purposes of this model that the Vikings correctly pick the winner of the competition, right? Which maybe that's not a safe assumption, but it's useful enough for the purposes of the model. And we can essentially pick a random number generator and with a distribution baked into it that'll allow us to pick essentially what their final PFF grade would be for the season, and we'll just pick the one with the higher PFF grade. Well, if you only brought one in, the average or median grade would be the median grade that you put in for that player. So above average. That's good. The Vikings needed offensive line help. But if you put both of them in there and just pick the better one out of the two, you'd end up with a borderline elite player on average. Now, that's a very optimistic set of considerations where you've got two players playing a position where they've both hit elite levels of play, where the competition is genuine in every sense of the word. You got some level of confidence in what the median outcome is going to be. And that's not the case for most competitions. Most competitions are competitions because you don't even know if either of them are good, much less that both of them could be good. But if, like, let's say the median outcome for that competition is that you produce an average starter, right? If that's the median outcome of each player in the competition, rather, the produced outcome is an above average player, just because you're selecting out of randomness the better of two outcomes. So competition is good because you're more likely to produce a better player. I think that competition in general, pushing people to be better, that's a true thing. That happens. I think that for the reasons that you outlined, that in the context of a fringe starter in the NFL, already attempting to justify their job, they're already probably playing to the best of their ability anyway, and that increased competition is not going to say, for example, make Ed Ingram play better. And we could say, hey, the Vikings brought in Dalton Reisner, Ed Ingram suddenly produced these good PFF grades, but I don't think he needed a kick in the pants to get better, right? And this is where we're just like, that's probably development and not competition. Mm-hmm. And it's really difficult to disaggregate that. But I think here, yeah, probably. I think that the increased competition did not, encourage him to play better.
The Brandon Powell doctrine asks...
Oh, that's good. That took me a second. That's good.
Is it more optimal to be 1st and 10 or 2nd and 1? Are there scenarios where it makes sense for a runner to go down short of the first down marker so as to maximize the value of the drive?
So models predict... So this has long been a thing in, like, not in analytics, Twitter or anything like that, but in, like, kind of the niche corners of football analytics. Like, this is, we've talked about this a lot, that 2nd and 1 is a more ideal down and distance at a particular position on the field than 1st and 10, 1 yard further down the field. It's very weird, right? But the reason that this is true is A, teams do not optimally pick plays on 1st and 10. B, defenses have a larger range of outcomes they can reasonably expect on 2nd and 1. And 3, teams are just more likely to take deep shots on 2nd and 1 because they know they've got another down or they've got a pretty high chance of converting. And so they feel pretty comfortable risking it on 2nd and 1 and throwing deep. And it turns out deep shots, they aren't taken enough in the NFL. And so there's a pretty high expected point value of that kind of pass attempt. And so that's why. But if that's the reason, then there's no inherent reason that 2nd and 1 is better than 1st and 10. There's a psychological or gamesmanship reason that you can circumvent by just being better at 1st and 10 from a play selection standpoint, not even from like a skill perspective. So I looked at the last couple of years of data for 2nd and 1 and 1st and 10 around the 50-yard line. And it changes, right, in terms of where you are. But it is that on 2nd and 1, your expected points are 2.47 at the 50-yard line. And then at the 49-yard line, on 1st and 10, it's 2.21 expected points. So that's lower, right? That's 0.2 points lower. That is neither marginal nor significant. So I wouldn't, make huge, decisions off that. But it's worth noting that this is also, so I just give a bunch of reasons the second one is better. It's worth noting that these are extrapolations that people have made and have kind of tested and have mostly found to be kind of true over the past couple of years. But also it should be noted that all of these models are built off of smoothing. Like they average all of the first and tens, all of the second and nines, all the second and eights, all the second and sevens, all the second and sixes for each yard line, and so on, and produce basically like, hey, once you're here, how often is it that a team scores a touchdown and so on, right? And the smoothing of those algorithms, or not algorithms, just equations, basically, very simple equations. But the smoothing of these formulas sometimes can produce quirky results, and this could be a product of smoothing. There's a piece that a football researcher posted that I'll put in the show notes where someone found that like actually second and one is not as valuable as it should be given those coaching parameters. Like the teams don't take risks enough on second one, so they could actually be riskier. And so in that calculation, hypothetically, teams could be, there could be something inherently better about second and one. And the reason that that's true is because your odds of converting a first down or second and one are higher than your odds of converting a first and 10. And a new series of downs is always really nice, right? And so a second and one is basically, you didn't get the first down, but your play selection plus the likelihood that you're going to get a first down on this play or the next one are so high that the value of the already existing first down in the other calculation is not big enough to overcome the play selection benefits. All of that said, no, get the first down. Like I think from a real world football perspective, and it should be noted that over the past 3 years on second and one at the 50, teams have technically lost expected points. Now, because expected points added should always average 0, like that's the whole point, is that it's the average outcome of a play. Every second and one should average 0 in terms of total expected points added over a large enough sample. Same with first and 10 and so on. The models have been calculated off of past data. The models typically don't include data from 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and, all of that. It's an old model built off of old data. Well, on second and one, teams on average lose expected points, both on a numerical like success rate scale and on an aggregate average scale. It's a small one, minus 0.02 per play. But on first and 10, they gain 0.01. Again, very small, should be close to 0. It basically is close to 0. But it turns out that advantage doesn't actually materialize and seems to be an advantage that's existed in previous versions of football strategy and also, which has been like smoothed out, and also maybe a product of the way that these formulas have been calculated in the first place. So get the first down.
Let's go to Cody, who asks, for Arif explains PFF corner, tight end Josh Oliver received a 91 grade from PFF despite having a holding penalty that turned back what would have been a receiving touchdown for Jefferson. How did Oliver grade so highly despite committing a penalty that took away 6 points?
So PFF does not take into account the impact of a play when they grade. There were, 47 plays. The Vikings didn't actually run that many plays. Normally it's like 60, but they're like, 47, 48 plays. Oliver was in on probably 30 of them. I don't remember a snap count. And that was 1 out of 30 or however many plays that he played. That's why. It's not because, it's not that PFF takes into account the magnitude of an outcome of a play and then just ignored it that time. It's that they just don't do that. They take into account the difficulty of a play. They take into account stuff like pressure. They take into account stuff like, and by difficulty, I don't mean difficulty of opposition, but like difficulty of situation. So like how often do teams pull? When they pull in this situation, how often are blocks successful if they are? And take that into account, right? Or how difficult was that throw? If that throw is very difficult and it was and it was like a deep throw, which is not the same thing as taking into account like outcome. But, because deep throws are just more difficult to accomplish, maybe it's a tight window, all of that, you get like a +2, right? And then they convert that to the Madden rating that we get. So that's why. It's because he was really stellar at all that other stuff. And he didn't have that many pass blocking reps, so his pass block rate is abysmal. It's like 30, right? Because of that penalty. But he had a bunch of run block reps, and he was very good at them. That's why I got a 91.
Also, for Arif's Sports Arif knows nothing about corner, It's a fantastic channel we have on the
It's a whole
on the
channel
Discord.
dedicated to it. Yeah.
/Magic Corner, which we don't have, but we probably should. Will
No, we
the
shouldn't.
Twins finally end their 0-18 playoff losing streak against the Toronto Blue Jays? Can known Canadian hater Arif place a hex on the country of Canada for the next 4 days to help the Twins' cause?
I cannot place a hex any more damaging than the one that apparently had been placed on them to prevent them from winning the Stanley Cup. So that kind of juju, I think, is difficult to kind of match and overcome. No, but how good can the Toronto Blue Jays be, honestly? Actually, don't answer that. I have no idea.
I was remarking at lunch today that I was just happy that it is physically impossible for the Twins
Right?
to actually.
I know exactly where you're going. Yeah,
It's
they're not
physically
playing the
impossible
Yankees.
to play the Yankees and lose. The Yankees aren't in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they didn't make it.
Nope, this has to be the year, or it's never going to happen.
Or it's never going to. So there's a great Dorktown style documentary on just the Twins and their playoff losses. I'm going to link it in the show notes. It's fantastic. Luke mentioned it on the Minnesota Football Party. I watched it. It's as advertised. It's very good. And it goes into their 0-18, which is like, I knew since 2004 that they had not won a playoff game. Like, I knew it wasn't just a series, is that they hadn't won a game since 2004. I did not realize how close they were to winning that many of those games. Like, there were like some of these games they had like a 91, 92% win probability at some point. It's just like, good Lord, this team is so Minnesota.
Yeah.
How did they ever win one?
I've said on the show before, I was at game 163, and it was remarkable. Or 164, whatever it was.
Such a good game.
I was at that game. There was so much momentum, and it was gone.
Yeah.
Just the whole town felt it. It was ridiculous. Bob the Bolsharif asks, for Arif's very good football team's corner, is it more embarrassing for the Bears to get absolutely blown out by the Chiefs or to blow a giant lead to the Broncos?
100%. Why are you even asking this question? 100% it's the Broncos. The Broncos are the worst team in football, including the Bears.
Boy, I think we could make an argument about the Bears being the worst.
We 100% could. They just lost to the team I just said was worse than them. That's a pretty strong argument by itself. I'm just saying, like, the Bears have, like, more talent.
Do they? Because their wide receiver is getting shopped and told to stay home.
Yeah, that one is a blow to the talent perspective. But they've got, I'm not going to put them 1-for-1 on wide receivers at the Broncos, which, by the way, half the receiving core is on IR, so it's not like it's what we expected going in. But, Justin Fields has a little bit more going for him than Russell Wilson, which is not a sentence I never thought I'd say. That offensive line seems to somehow be a little bit better than the Broncos' offensive line. Definitely not a sentence I thought I'd say at all. That's shocking to me that could even be the case. And defensively, the Bears are way better. So, there's that.
And they still
is maybe strong.
They still control the first 2 picks of the draft, which is remarkable.
That's incredible. Yeah. But I still think, regardless of that, it's still more embarrassing to blow a giant lead, generally speaking, right? Because all you have to do is take low-risk plays and not turn the ball over and just, take your time. It was 28-3 or something lead like that? Probably not 28-3. There would have been more jokes on the timeline. But it was like a 28, like a 4-score lead, right? That's insane to blow. To anybody, if they blew a 4-score lead to the Chiefs, yeah, you get it. But that's more embarrassing than never having gotten there and losing it in the first place.
Yeah.
Like if the Chiefs beat them 41-10, or actually it was like 41-20. Yeah, you know what I get. Like if the Chiefs beat them 41-20, right? That is less embarrassing than if the Bears go up 41-20 and then lose 60-41. That's way worse. So blowing a lead in general is worse. Blowing one to a team as bad as the Broncos is even more embarrassing. I don't think these things are comparable at all.
Yeah. J. Rue Cart, asks, This year's team is boring. If you could add one personality from any era to spice up the culture just for the sake of the stories and quotes, who would it be?
I have 2 answers popping in my head right away. Jerry Burns, Jared Allen.
My answers are Jared Allen and Fred Smoot.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. Percy would make things interesting. I don't know in terms of like having a good quote, but certainly 3 years later, we'll have a bunch of great
Yeah,
stories.
3 years later, someone is going to be playing pool with Master, and
Right.
we're going to hear all about the good ones. But it's unfortunate that that hasn't been a thing this year. I really enjoyed the pool game that Master had going for him.
Yeah, well, that was a Bleach Report thing. Now he's with like Amazon, which
Hmm.
is fantastic at the bag, but we lost the pool.
We did lose the pool game. Zach asks if you can choose one player or one person rather who does play-by-play and color for the Vikings versus Bills Super Bowl in 2038. It can be anyone, alive or dead. The only rule is they cannot be affiliated with football in some way, i.e., it cannot be a former player, coach, or TV radio person. Who do you pick?
Donald Trump. That one's easy.
This is going to be a booth with Donald Trump and Taylor Swift.
I guess I can't really argue that Taylor Swift is unaffiliated with football because Donald Trump is more affiliated with football than Taylor Swift
As
is.
a former owner of a USFL team, famously.
Yeah, and attempted to buy an NFL team.
Yeah,
too.
attempted to buy the Bills, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Bills. Yeah, which there's a whole story about how like when the league did their due diligence, they found out he didn't have the money he claimed to have, which that's a big shocker 20 years later, right? 30 years later? Yeah. But but yeah, he had manipulated his holdings and receipts and tax income and stuff like that to suggest that he had like enough in liquid cash to buy a team. But it turns out he was just borrowing from past or future years or something like that. Very, very good moment for him.
Yeah. Kenneth Allen asks, what non-magical explanation is there for the Freaky Friday body swap of Mahomes and Wilson Sunday night? And how can the Vikings manage to pull off a similar non-magical trick?
Yeah, well, obviously, magic is not involved, so I'm glad that you acknowledge that. Um, you would so this falls into the realm of science. You would simply have to acquire the Monstars potion from Space Jam. Um, and
He says quite
that's science.
authoritatively.
What? That's science. That's the aliens had superior technology and stole all the basketball talent from like Charles Barkley and a tall white guy who's not Dirk Nowitzki. Who was that? I don't remember.
You know, I don't remember if it was Christian Leitner or not. I don't want to know.
No way. That guy was way too tall. And good.
It's been so long since I watched that in the theater. Yeah.
Patrick Ewing was one of the guys who lost his right. He was in there. It was like Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, some tall guy.
I'm not Googling this.
Yeah, I'm gonna pretend that's it. So yeah, do what Zach Wilson did and acquire the Space Jam formula.
Yeah. Do that. Jack Rackham has apparently noticed something. Every time Kirk jogs onto the field following a kick return, he uses his thumb to motion players off the field or something of that nature. Why in the hell does he do this?
To get them off the field. It's time for the offense to get on the field. I don't know. That's weird.
That's a really now I'm going to be looking for it.
That's a tick. I'm going to be looking for it. Yeah, that's a weird tick, but like obviously there's no like prescribed reason for it.
Eric the Red asks, without cheating, how many Vikings players' middle names could you list? And be honest.
So before the show, I was like trying to remember if I could figure out one, and it's like, well, Adrian Peterson is not on the team, so I don't know any. It turns out, and then I took a stab at Kirk Cousins. I was like, he looks like his middle name is David. And we looked it up, and his middle name is Daniel. I'm going to count that as a win. That kills. And then James, you looked up someone.
Oh, I was looking up a couple of different people trying to come up with names, and C.J. Ham's name was the one that we stopped on because Thaddeus was his middle name, and we both agreed that was awesome.
It's incredible. Cortez Thaddeus, Jr., Ham Jr.
Yep, that is I could not. That man speaks clearly to my soul. Andre asks if Kirktober clearly didn't start Sunday, October 1st. What does that mean? Rather, does that mean that fat, dumpy groundhog didn't see his shadow?
Oh my God.
I can't believe I had to say that.
So, first of all, it's long been acknowledged as part of Kirktober lore that Kirktober doesn't necessarily start or even end in October. it's kind of like Oktoberfest in that starts in September, but also kind of like Ramadan in that it occurs on a lunar calendar. Uh, so, a little bit of both, right? So in 2018, Crooktober started on November 25th and ended December 23rd. That was a strong month of play without any games replayed poorly. In 2019, it was October 6th to October 24th. That's where his name comes from because it's the entire month of October. So people started calling it Crooktober. But it turns out it happens more often in November than it does in October. In 2020, it was November 1st to November 29th, a solid month. I believe that one was 5 games where he played out of his mind. In 2021, it was November 7th to December 5th. Again, another solid month that started in November when he played out of his mind, didn't have a bad game. In last year, in 2022, he did not have, there was no Crooktober. We were denied a Crooktoberfest. It's funny because it's the most games he's ever won, but he didn't have a stretch a month long of him playing very well. Now, you'll remember from that season, he actually played very poorly for large chunks of most games and then dug the team out of the holes that he often himself dug in the first place by playing poorly. But he finished with like 8 game-winning drives and 8 fourth-quarter comebacks or whatever. So it all sort of worked out. I'm not going to say in the end, but in those games. There was no Crooktober last year, and that led to some wins and some really weird conversations about how good of a quarterback Kirk Cousins is. But yeah, so it doesn't have to start in October. It very often doesn't. Crooktober is more of a November holiday, if we're being honest.
It's more of a state of mind than a location, really.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, I don't want to use that sentence. That's dumb.
Yeah,
but thanks, James.
I'll bite that bullet. Let's wrap up. We got 3 more questions here. Nolan Kaler asks for North Code, with Green Day set to headline this year's Grey Cup. I suppose, this is for North Code. What would make up the best set list for the Superior Canadian fan base at the Superior Football Championship?
So I wrote it down as a small set list. Obviously, you can't have a full concert. I ended up with probably still too many songs, but you have to start with American Idiot to kind of establish, hey, we're smart, unlike the people down to the south of us, our southern neighbors, right? So American Idiot, you start with that. And then Last of the American Girls. I put that one in there because I just assume that like lonely American teenage boys pretend they've got a Canadian girlfriend, the same thing happens with Canadian boys and American girlfriends. So Last of the American Girls. Redundant because the CFL is redundant. When I Come Around, so when you just decide to adopt the Rouge, Basket Case because why are you watching this kind of football? Give Me Novocaine, I think self-explanatory. 21 Guns because you don't have any up there, so decided to throw some in there. And then I also threw in Longview just because I felt like that represented the Canadian experience. Look at the lyrics. And then you have to finish the set list with Nice Guys Finish Last.
Why? Why does that?
No, Nice Guys Finish Last makes perfect sense.
Not They're the Canadian. One I'm objecting to. Oh my god. All right. Logan Bull Sharif asks question for Arif's parenting corner because we're clearly in a good space. My 3-year-old has been quite the little head lately, as he deliberately favors his mom over me, to the point where if she's nursing and can't play with him, he will rather play alone than with me.
Wow.
What can I do to improve the situation? How do I get my 3-year-old to not cling to his mom, which only stresses her out?
His problem is way beyond my ken. I would... God. So, I mean, he's 3. So, first of all, I obviously don't have any real answers to this question. But I don't know if he has a strong set of interests, like a particular show that he loves that must be annoying, like Paw Patrol or something less propaganda than that. I don't know, Thomas the Tank Engine. I don't know. Whatever it is. If there is some kind of property or activity or whatever that he loves a lot, have him do it when you're around. So he associates it with you and just you, right? That's my best guess. And that just comes from like hey, this is a kind of psychological manipulation, and kids are pretty easy targets for that sort of thing. That's all I got.
Here, I was expecting you to go the spoiling route and just like make sure that whenever a toy or something is brought home, that you're the one giving it to them. I was
Okay, that one
expecting
makes
that
sense
from
too.
you.
I didn't think about that one. That's fair, but it sounds like you don't like that because you call it spoiling as opposed to
Oh
positive
no,
gift association.
I absolutely believe in spoiling kids in order to
Oh, okay,
like
yeah,
win over
perfect.
affection. No, that's I'm
You can
longtime
combine the
listeners.
two.
Yeah, longtime
Right,
listeners
yeah.
know that I have long since been a supporter of
Since the
this
third episode at least.
at least.
Um, so you could, if it's a Thomas the Tank Engine, there's got to be no kids right now that are super into Thomas the Tank Engine.
That is
Are
a
there?
lie. That is a lie. My kid was
Awesome.
very
That makes me very happy.
my kid was
Um,
very into Thomas the Tank Engine.
so yeah, you bring home Thomas the Tank Engine gifts. We just combined the two approaches there.
You know, it's very possible. It's also possible that this is a phase that will eventually
probably
crash and burn. However, this is Arif's parenting corner, and he hasn't said anything that's going to completely damage the child yet. So I'll keep my opinions to myself. Finally, Ojibwe Pun
I'm on
asks,
a run. I think that's at least two, maybe three pieces of parenting advice I've given where you haven't been like, that is dangerous.
we'll go 2.5.
2.5.
Ojibwe Pun asks, how much does Taylor Swift increase Travis Kelce's trade value?
So she just came out and said they're not really dating. They're more of a hanging out together sort of thing, which is like, first of all, you're both over 30. Like, come on. That's like a 20-year-old thing to say.
That's a thing that you can talk about on your live journal, not something you can talk about on Blue Sky.
Speaking of, by the way, speaking of like overtly flirting in public, like the two of them have kind of done. So I'm going through my live journal, and there's like a bunch.
A sentence he can say in 2023.
Right. Only because James got some emails from them. I don't even like open the email account I have associated with my old live journal. Like that's how far removed I am from it. But James still uses the same email, it sounds like. Or he's like automatic forwarding or something like that. Something smarter than me. But I'm going through and there's a bunch of like BuzzFeed quizzes, or so maybe it was even before BuzzFeed. It's from blogthings.com. Good work. Wow. The internet ruled in 2006. I kind of mean that unironically, but I'm going through and like one of the things I find here is that the very first result I publish on my live journal to all of my friends, you are a fun flirt. You just can't help yourself. You flirt with everyone you know, guys, girls, crushes, and friends. They're all victims to your charm, which is, I wouldn't word that way in 2023, but okay. You're into silly innuendos, sexy jokes, and playful touches. You are a huge flirt, yet you never make anyone too uncomfortable, which I don't love that they threw the word too in there, but okay. And then I scroll down like 3 posts, and there's this story of me like flirting with my AP test proctor, which is like, oh, okay, yeah, that's 100% true. And like, there's like friends in my comments that were like, yeah, I was there. You were 100% doing that. That was shameless. And I was like, oh, was she into it? And they're like, yeah, and that's what's weird. She's an adult. And I'm like, okay, this is okay. I apparently like, you know, on those AP tests, they've got like these like wax paper seals that you have to like tear off in order to start the test so that, you know, they know that it hasn't been tampered with or whatever. So I apparently turned one of those into like a paper boat, like a wax paper boat that I gave her. That's a lot. I don't have that kind of game right now. So yeah, anyway, those two are flirting in a way that's way cooler than that. Honestly, that's not bad. It's that she responded, and I think probably to humor me, right? But also, like, you should just shut that kid down. but I apparently got a 5 in that test, so you know. But yeah, I would say from a monetary standpoint, enormous, right? You heard about the sales going through the roof for not just Travis Kelce jerseys, but all kinds of Chiefs merch, the custom jerseys that are like Swifties and with the 87 number on it. You know, the league exposure, when I'm curious to see kind of what the ratings were for Sunday Night Football relative to most Sunday Night Footballs. You know, we'll see. But like, I think he's functionally untradeable anyway. So like, what are we talking about? Like the Chiefs would never do that, especially because the trade disvalue, I don't know how to put it, the cost of a trade is so enormous because you don't want like Swifties also going after, like, first of all, the Kansas City fan base would be like, who is this dude throwing to now? Like, that's the first thing, right? But the second thing is like now, like all of these Taylor Swift fans have bought like a bunch of Kansas City Chiefs merch. Like, I wouldn't want to tick them off. That sounds stupid. So there's a higher cost than any benefit some team is going to be able to get for trading for him.
Yeah, that's just one of those you can call and ask and they will laugh. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is going to be the end of episode 484. An episode that will long be remembered.
It's like
for the continuation of the Arif. You know what's funny, and I'm being completely serious here. I felt a little bad about what had happened, and what I wanted to do was send bougie cookies to Arif as like just like eat them on air.
Yeah.
Eat them on air.
Right.
They were all closed and were not delivering at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, okay, so it's a crumble cookie, the child labor cookies,
yes.
They were just straight up closed, right?
Yes.
And I was like, man, I can't really, that doesn't make sense to me because their primary competitors are Insomnia cookies. Like, literally, it's in the name, right? Mm-hmm. And they cater to college kids, and they cater to people with munchies. It's like basically their whole deal, right? Like, you're going to overpay for cookies because you're, high, right? Like, you can't.
Yeah.
Great business model, right? But like maybe they just position themselves differently in the market. Okay, fine. So we're like, oh, we might as well get Insomnia cookies. And they're just not delivering right now, which is crazy because James checked at 11:48. I looked at the time because he's like, they're not delivering. And I'm like, that cannot be right. I remember getting Insomnia cookies at 2 a.m. Mind you, that was the Dinkytown location, which would not deliver to here where I'm at now. But like, come on. It's in the name.
Yeah, it's... I laughed so hard. It's like I actually tried.
It's not like I could get the cookies myself right now.
No, it turns out you'd need to acquire another set of wheels in order to get there. Good Lord. Let's plug something other than your vehicle, which is apparently visiting the greater metro at high speeds. What do you have to plug?
I hope they take it to a chop shop or something, man. This car needs to be done. There's like a bunch of stuff in the trunk that like I grabbed from my house from moving that was important enough to keep and not important enough to unpack. And I can't even remember what it is right now. So I'm sure they'll enjoy it. It's in a giant garbage bag, so they'll probably throw it away. But yeah.
Good. Why the hell not?
Yeah, whyleftpost.substack. I promise you that, like, so I've been so concerned that when I promote my stuff that I just sound sad and I'm asking for pity dollars. And I, like, promise you I'm very aware of how that sounds and that I am not trying to do that. I want to produce good content that people want to pay for and not like, hey, I heard about your car. Right? So I promise you. But hey, if you do feel bad, whyleftpost.substack.com. I've got a story recapping the Chargers game. I was going to have a story about the Vikings and blitz rates and kind of what that looks like and why they blitz so often and whether or not that's successful and how blitzing works for the Vikings as opposed to in other schemes. We'll see if I've got the bandwidth for that this week, but that's the plan later this week.
Why are you trying to have a weirder or worse year than I am?
We talked about this too. It was just like, hey, I don't know that I could possibly have, like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe that's what it was.
Why do you have to live in such interesting times?
Yeah, it's very, yeah. Like, and the worst thing about that is that is both like I think it's actually like a Chinese curse. It's not like one of those apocryphal, like, we're kind of racist, so we'll just say the Chinese say that. I think that's actually true. But also it's like a Midwestern curse.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's a very, interesting. Like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, between the three of us, this is a hell of a year. And I can't wait to see what happens next. So, for Arif and his car, and myself, thank you guys so much for listening, and I cannot stress this enough. Maybe next time, put it in a garage.
Stupid aside, so bad.
We'll see you later this week. Oh my god. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.
That's the best show by far the best show we've done since I snuck Luke onto the show. The ending sealed it. Like that was the question of the NFL record. Like, do you go for it? You're in field goal range here. Are you gonna go for it, James? Or are you gonna not?
Yeah, McDaniels didn't want to kick the field goal. I criticized that. You remembered that, took it to heart. So,
and the last person I'm going to have pity for is Sean Payton, or in this case, Arif Hassan. So, fucking excellent, man.